Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm finally going to be reacting to pimps. And in the video I'm going to be responding to, I can use the term pimp without, risking libel because the piece of German TV that I'll be showing you pretends to take you behind the facade of a legal mega brothel and tell you what's really going on inside, except this same brothel is busted years later for human trafficking. Some of you may be familiar with the case. It's the Paradise brothel. 1 year after the brothel opened, they found human trafficking there, but the brothel owner said, well, we just rent the rooms. We didn't know, as they always do. And then a few years later, the same thing happened again. Around 2016, they did a raid and were able to prove that trafficking was not isolated incidences, but a pattern, and that the brothel owners knew and were actively participating in exploitation of women. And even as is, I think watching the video, even if you didn't know that that brothel was later busted for human trafficking, you'd be pretty disturbed. The video itself is in German, so I'm going to be putting English subtitles, and then obviously responding in English to it and giving you the background info that I have. And yeah, just talking about how the Paradise is not an isolated case, just happens to be the most famous one. And yeah, just showing you how much tolerance the German media and German politicians had for brothel owners, pimps. We're always told the pimp lobby doesn't exist. Yeah, I think this video alone puts a dent in that claim. Okay, let's start watching.
Es ist ganz witzig, da ist das Modell.
Von 5.500 Quadratmetern FKK- und Saunaclub vor den Toren Stuttgarts.
Okay, you know me, I'm probably going to be pausing this video every 8 seconds. I already have to comment on this. So they called it a sauna club, and the other word for it is FKK, which stands for Freie Körperkultur, free body culture, which is something that I think was mostly popular in Eastern Germany, when Germany was divided, obviously. And it's the idea that you can go to a beach or a lake and swim there and not wear any clothes. Yeah, nude swimming, including like families, men, women, kids. And I think people outside of Germany are often a bit freaked out about that, but my understanding is I've been to some of these places. It's not that much of a big deal. Obviously, if you're not comfortable with that, you shouldn't go, but it's not, nudity in itself is not a bad thing. It's not immediately full of voyeurs and a super sexualized context. It's just people who enjoy being in the water and the sun and feeling that on their whole body. It's not... You tell me if that's my German socialization. I don't think that's a bad thing. And I'm kind of saddened at that concept that actually, I guess, maybe almost helps have the nude body in a non-sexual context, that's also a euphemism for brothel. So if someone in Germany invites you to a sauna club or an FKK club, that's a brothel. Just FYI.
Also wir sind jetzt im Prinzip hier.
Eines der größten Bordelle Europas, behauptet Pressesprecher Michael Berettin.
Yeah, so just FYI, the people you're going to see in this video, like one of them, Michael Berettin, he's the PR guy of the brothel. And I'm like, you're a journalist, you're TV, and you're inviting the official PR person. No way in hell is he going to tell you the truth of what's going on. And like I told you at the beginning, just 1 year after that brothel opened, it was already busted for trafficking, but not closed down because they usually can't prove that the owners knew. If it was already going on, no way in hell would he tell you. I mean, obviously he wouldn't incriminate himself. I mean, if I'm doing a critical piece on agriculture, am I gonna just interview the head agriculture company guy or the PR manager and ask them what's going on, give me the inside scoop? He's gonna say, we treat our workers fairly, right? Everyone here has a work visa. Like, we're not tax evading, we're not abusing any human rights. Obviously, yeah.
Läuft hier hin, kriegt hier vorne seinen Bademantel, seine Plättchen.
Just to tell you, the John gets a bathrobe when he walks into the brothel, but the women, that's why it's called FKK, right? Free body culture. Free body culture is like the most disgusting euphemism for prostitution. The women are fully nude, and the Johns can choose to be. But interestingly enough, a lot of them in front of the other guys want to wear bathrobes. Although it's not unheard of that men will sometimes go into rooms together and abuse women side by side as like almost a race to the finish line, or I don't know what they're comparing, but yeah. Usually the men want to be a little bit covered and the women are naked, and that alone already, like that power dynamic of just that, one person fully nude, the other one somewhat clothed, That's already like creepy as fuck.
Und dann läuft er praktisch hier rein, steht jetzt in der Clubatmosphäre drin.
Besichtigung des Rohbaus mit dem Innenausstatter.
Rechter Hand haben wir den kompletten Wellnessbereich.
Wellness, relaxation, that's one of the things that brothel owners did after 2002 is rebrand the industry and say, we're not just sex, you know, you get massages, you get, I don't know, foot treatments, you get sauna, you can be in the pool. Just full disclosure, some of these brothels, I know because John's tell us, are disgusting. Like there's fungus and like all kinds of stuff that you can catch, but they tried to rebrand and be like a full relaxation station. I mean, it's not new. Bathhouses have historically often been a place for prostitution. Japan is famous for that. They still call them soap lands today because like having your body cleaned by the woman you're exploiting is part of it often. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case in many other countries.
Jetzt kommen wir natürlich im Bereich der Entspannungsräume, auch wenn es noch nicht so danach ausschaut.
Entspannungsräume nennen Sie das?
Wir nennen es Entspannungsräume. Wir dachten, das ist eigentlich der umschreibendste Begriff.
And they just admitted, they're like, we need this harm-denying language. I just always want you to be suspicious when people talk to you in euphemisms about the sex trade. I mean, sex trade's a euphemism. Just if I say rape trade, people get really turned off, and then I have to say, well, not in every single case, but a lot, you know, and that makes it complicated. But relaxation room, yeah, it's a euphemism, and the pimps just told you it's a euphemism. So like, don't use their language. I think when this was happening, the term sex work, I don't think it was so big yet in Germany, so they're probably going to be calling the women like service providers. We'll see. It could be interesting to see what kind of language they use for the women.
Das erste Bett ist fertig. Gigantisch, müssen wir gleich mal testen. Herrlich. Perfekt.
Ew.
Sehr gut.
So I did the job of the journalists for them, and I looked up who this guy is. So this man, Michael Beretin, he has had a rap sheet that goes all the way back to the 80s, where he was sentenced for illegal driving, car theft, fraud, and violent robbery that got him 2 years in prison. He then ran a naturopathy school for a while, and he ran it into the ground, that business, before getting into the prostitution industry, where he was for a while fairly successful as a PR person for a prostitution advertising site, and eventually working for this brothel, the Paradise. People tell you there's no pimp lobby, but there's all kinds of organizations, and he, for example, was president of the National Association of German erotic businesses. He also became a TV personality, a so-called brothel tester, a show that ran for 3 years on a private TV channel, where he and also a female brothel owner, they went to these small brothels and helped them sort of clean up their image, get better decoration in the rooms, or get a bit better business model or whatever. As a reality TV show. And then at the end they would send a test John into the brothel and then interview him how the experience was, which I'm happy to say there was outrage about this to a degree. Not so much that the show was cancelled, but some people thought this was mildly distasteful. He has been accused of all kinds of crimes, right? And it's only in 2014 that he is one of the main people suspected of knowing that trafficking was happening at this brothel that we're looking at here. But it takes a while for the justice process, I guess. It takes all the time, I think, until 2018, until he's finally sentenced. And before he's sentenced for getting rich off of brutal sex trafficking, he is in court for different incidents. This is his 10th time in court in 2018 for violently beating up a business associate, for which he's sentenced to 6 months parole. And in that same year, before he's sentenced, the pro-prostitution lobby invites him to a major so-called sex work networking event as a marketing expert. Despite all the charges against him, including the trafficking, the same people who defame activists like me for like being paid for by the church or something, a lot of these same people who are very active on Twitter, like all kinds of leeches on the sex industry, like lawyers and the like, who defend men like this. Yeah, they were sitting on a podium with this guy at this event just shortly before he was sentenced as a sex trafficker. So yeah, I mean, which team do you want to be on? That one whose members are routinely sentenced for sex trafficking, or the other side? So I've talked about this a lot on this channel. The media is complicit in the dehumanization of women. So far, we haven't seen any, but I mean, they were showing that they were still building the building, renovating the building. So now they just put in that sound of a woman moaning. Are we going to see women as people, or are they just all going to like be looking to the camera saying, "This is the best job ever. We get treated so well"? Yeah, we'll see. So the head journalist on this piece is a woman. And I don't really expect women to do a better job. I mean, when we know female solidarity is fragile and almost rare, and if you've made it to the top of like a media business to the point of being like head journalist on a piece, head producer, chances are you've had to become a little bit one of the dudes. I don't know what this journalist does otherwise. So this was all like spearheaded by a woman.
Ja klar, herzlich willkommen, grüß dich.
Zur offiziellen Eröffnung darf Mann auch die Gattin mitbringen, später dann nicht mehr.
Whoa. Did you catch that? They said for the celebration to open the brothel, you can bring your wife, but later you don't. I mean, obviously not. You wouldn't take your wife and then show you're cheating on her, duh. But the point is, in these brothels, women are not allowed unless they are cleaners or women selling sex. Because you don't want this atmosphere disturbed by like, jealousy or men being confused. Like, okay, I just felt up that woman and then she was mad at me because she was also a guest. So yeah, the people who love to talk about prostitution in gender neutral language, right? German is a gendered language. So if I say John in German, that word is male or female. Freier would be male and Freierin would be female. Right, and I refuse to use the female form when I speak in general terms because there's hardly any women doing this. And how do we know? We know that because the biggest businesses do not allow female customers. They're precluded from the start. It's supposed to be men's only club, a man cave. No women, unless they're cleaning or available, which I think is already pretty like Handmaid's Tale in a, small, contained space.
Geladen sind Freunde, Kollegen
Jetzt kommt hier der Steueranzeiger, gell, Jürgen?
und andere wichtige Menschen.
Herr Facade, Stadtrat.
Früher produzierte in diesen Hallen eine Firma spezialisiert auf Blasformtechnik. Jetzt wird hier Sex verkauft, geschickt als Wellness verpackt. Dieser Herr ist Gemeinderat der Messestadt Echterdingen, ebenso wie...
Right? These are local politicians who are there for the opening of the brothel. You can tell me again how there's not a pimp lobby, but somehow pimps and politicians are really chummy. They're here to celebrate a great business brought to their little local community. Actually, prostitution is illegal in a lot of rural areas in Germany. You have to meet a certain number of residents before they have to designate legal areas for brothels. I don't know if, Echterding met that quota or if they decided it'd just be great business. Local politicians have a certain amount of control to say, yeah, we do want this or we don't want that, when they haven't yet met the threshold. So obviously they're smiling here. They're like, yay, this is a nice little business for our local community, some local pride.
Diese Dame. Die Kommunalpolitiker bekommen eine Extraführung, um sich anzuschauen, wo das, was die Gemüter mancher ihrer Bürger so erregt, künftig stattfinden soll.
I'd be interested if we go into that a little bit more, because very often when a community in Germany reaches that threshold where they are legally forced to designate legal prostitution areas, there's resistance from the local population to say we don't want that. That's not the kind of business we want, because they know what that means. They also like to have it in rural areas because then outside the city, they're less likely to be spotted by, people who know their wife and all that. These men will be coming, yes. They will bring business, yes. But a lot of them are going to be drunk. A lot of them are going to be rude. A lot of them are going to be harassing women in the area surrounding the brothel as well. People's kids are going to be walking to school past the brothel. For years, when I was at uni, I had to go by a brothel every day. And yeah, that does make you think. I mean, at that point, I was already an abolitionist, so every time I went by, I was just furious and disgusted and worried. And let's say I don't know anything about prostitution. The presence of that brothel is telling me, well, he has a restaurant, he has, a car sales shop, whatever, and he has a brothel, right? It's telling me this is normal. Do you think that might increase the chances of young women falling on hard times considering if that's a potential employer? So lots of reasons why residents don't want it. Often, especially, rural, maybe somewhat conservative populations are accused of being, prudes or whatever, sex negative, blah, blah, blah. But there are some really valid concerns why you do not want a brothel next door. And I think most people, when they honestly think about it, they do not want it. They don't want the drunk men, the harassing men, etc. Anyone who's lived near a brothel knows that's what happens. And also, maybe you want your village to be famous for something else than what it became famous for, which is human trafficking.
Wir sind eine Stadt mit über 35.000 Einwohnern und da ist das einfach nicht mehr zu verhindern.
Okay, so now we know they came over that threshold of 50,000 and now they have to. So he's not super happy about that. He's like, we were forced to do this.
Und wir haben ja im Gemeinderat auch versucht, das möglichst irgendwie zu konzentrieren und in den Rand zu bringen. Das ist schon besser, als wenn es irgendwo in allen Straßen stattfindet.
People, again, they complain, it's in the industrial area, that's more dangerous for women, they're more isolated. I do understand that feels a little less safe for women. I want everyone to be super clear that there is trafficking, rape, and murder of women who are in the heart of a city. Like Frankfurt, for example, the red light district is right next to the Bahnhof, next to the train station. All kinds of horrific crimes have been committed there. So just being in a city center does not immediately make you safe. That's a myth. But I do understand the sense of, oh, we're outcasts. We're on the edge of the city. That's where, farms are, and that's where industry is, and that's where we're going to be. But like I said, the concerns of residents are not imagined. They are real. And yeah, if you believe in legalizing prostitution, that's a conflict for you to figure out. I think everyone's human rights is being violated, the women's and the residents, and we should try to reduce prostitution. But yeah, maybe keep watching the video to see if I can make a convincing case as to why.
Jetzt ist es auch ein Teil in dieser Stadt, auch ein Gewerbezweig und hoffentlich ein erfolgreicher Gewerbezweig. Und ich denke, ja, wir müssen uns arrangieren.
If we're going to have prostitution, then we fucking hope it's going to bring a lot of tax. But no one who was interviewed here was super excited about this. They were like, I guess we gotta.
Immerhin hat der Gemeinderat für solche Etablissements eine Vergnügungssteuer eingeführt.
Again, the audio effects are gross and dehumanizing. Again, we haven't seen a single woman. Now they're invisible. They're just moaning. So Vergnügungssteuer, a pleasure tax. That is something unique to the sex trade in Germany. It's a tax that only women in the sex trade have to pay, which sort of estimates their earnings and how much they might owe. They pay that daily, right? $30 a day. At the end of the year, it's supposed to help women who struggle to do their taxes because their taxes are automatically paid and they're going to be paid through the brothel owner. And at the end of the year, if she has, done good bookkeeping, she will see some of that money again. She can maybe, say I don't know, I bought condoms and that cost this much money. And then that's a work expense. And then you get some money back. But how likely do you think it is that women are doing that? Well, we know the vast majority of women are migrants. It's a statistical reality, and it's completely clear. It's poor women, impoverished women with a lack of access to education. Some of the women in German prostitution are illiterate, right? There's social workers telling us some of these women can't read and write. They're going to do their taxes at the end of the year. I don't think so. I think that's the state being a pimp, taking its cut. I don't think women are seeing a lot of that money again. The only thing that it avoids is them, being arrested for tax evasion. Do you know what the Paradise Brothel later, of course, was also sentenced for, despite not just the human trafficking? Of course, tax evasion. Of course.
So hat auch die Messestadt etwas davon, von dem Geschäft mit dem Sex.
Morgen geht es hier richtig los. Richtig los heißt, morgen checken die Damen hier ein.
That's what I was waiting for. What are they going to call them? Ladies. And I actually think in that context, lady is not a compliment. I mean, is it better than hooker and whore or a girl? I guess so. But this ladies has this fake formality. You're in a context where you're in a bathrobe, the woman is naked, you're calling her a lady. You're putting, again, a nice word on a situation that's already screwed up just in terms of its setting. Yeah, lady is a fairly common term that Johns use, but it's still this, oh, look at me, I'm using respectful language, blah. But how does he actually treat her at the end of the day? Like, it's almost gaslighting to call them ladies, because they're not, when we think of a lady, we think of, a woman who's well established, has a decent income, maybe she's walking around with a fur coat, maybe she's a fancy lady, right? That's what we think of. And like, that doesn't reflect the reality of those women at all.
Und morgen Abend ist Bademantelpflicht. Da stehen wir also dann nicht mehr im Sakko da, sondern im Bademäntel oder im Handtüchle. Und da geht es dann um knallhartes betriebswirtschaftliches Umsatz machen.
Wow, isn't he honest? Wow, I'm surprised. He said, like, our main motive is profit maximization. Sometimes there's this sudden honesty.
7 Milliarden Euro im Jahr soll das Gewerbe bringen bundesweit. Einen Teil davon werden die Damen jetzt hier auf den schwäbischen Feldern in Sichtweite zur neuen Stuttgarter Messe erwirtschaften.
The new numbers we have put the profit of the German prostitution industry at 12.5 up to 14.5 billion profits. So I don't know if that's an old number or an underestimation. The proximity to the trade fair center is interesting. It basically permits all the, businessmen after they're done at the fair to sort of retire for the evening in that wellness brothel. That's the point of the location. And obviously that's where they're going to go without their female colleagues and possibly even do some, bro business deals without any women present because they're not allowed in there, right? So I mean, could this industry get any more feminist?
Sie kennen sich, die Mädchen aus den verschiedenen Clubs in ganz Deutschland. Das ist Chanel. Sie kommt aus Berlin und ist eine der wenigen, die nicht vor unserer Kamera zurückschreckt.
What was I going to say? The women know each other? That's not actually generally true from what I've read. It's quite common that women do a lot of location changing. And that's something that later, the pimps that you're going to see in this video or have already seen talk about, they needed a constantly changing roster of women because men want to see new, what some of them would call fresh meat. And that way, the women are always changing. They're not like, I'm not traveling around the country with my besties on a sex tour. There's very few women for whom prostitution is like that. Social isolation is one of the key mechanisms by which profiteers and pimps keep women under control. They make sure she doesn't make friends. They give her trouble if she talks too much to other women. They make women compete with each other, so they're mistrustful of each other. They make women do things like, maybe if you don't use a condom, right, then you take business away from the woman who insists on always using one. Those kinds of things. They're telling us here that these women are basically like a group of women on tour through Germany. That's not realistic from what I know about the German sex trade. At least not for the vast majority.
Im zweiten Stock kümmert sich Hausdame Gabi um die Frauen.
Schatzi, soll ich das Formular schon ausfüllen?
Nimmt ihre
Yeah, so that's not unusual that in any type of sex trade, legal or illegal, there's a madam, or in the Asian massage palace, they call her mama-san, Miss Mama, who is sort of the lowest rank of pimp. I'm not accusing the woman of this video to be a pimp. I don't know if she was involved in any illegal activity. I'm just saying this is also something used by criminal gangs. A lot of time, these women they were formerly in the sex trade and they sort of age out of what a lot of Johns would term fuckability. And then there's really only one way to move up the ladder. But you can decrease your prices. You can try to leave the industry with a huge gap in your resume, or you can become this like lowest rung of what I would view as an exploiter, but legally, in this case, not. And I guess that's also a tricky thing for us abolitionists because a lot of these women have, years of trauma themselves, and they really didn't have a lot of good options. On the other hand, plenty of women decide they will never become madams or mama sons. And, we can't always excuse women's actions by reference to their trauma. I think it's a tricky thing for us abolitionists to figure out how to deal with those actors under, a Nordic model style legislation. And I don't have easy answers.
Daten auf, überprüft die Papiere und fragt, wie lange die Frauen bleiben möchten.
Yeah, again, right, because they're going to be changing sometimes bi-weekly, so quite often, their location. And yeah, here's that where a lot of people imagine this is the regulation, this is the part that really works, right? We have paper, we have, it written down that, we know who the women are, right? We have the paperwork. But as I told you, this brothel was busted for trafficking, so clearly not a barrier to human trafficking. And I'm not even talking about the women exploited through poverty, addiction, trauma without a pimp, which in my opinion is also exploitation. I'm talking about straight up, undeniable, convicted human trafficking. That's not a barrier.
Chanel, warum erschrickt eigentlich jeder vor der Kamera?
Weil ich denke,
Weil sie scheu ist.
die meisten Damen wollen auch nicht, dass es so publik wird. Dass es jeder weiß. Oder dass eventuell Bekannte oder Familienangehörige das mitbekommen.
Yeah, right. So, like I said, a lot of these women, even back then, the number of migrant women was already quite high. And it's hard enough for German women. Like, most German women I know who are sex trade survivors don't show their face, don't use their real name if they do show their face, or change their appearance when they show up in public. I think there's quite possibly another level for those women who come from like the rural parts of Bulgaria and Romania. They're, having been in prostitution is like a social death sentence. So no way do you want to have your face online. However, the sex trade itself is set up in a way that there's actually quite likely blackmailable material of her online. I've probably talked about this in other videos where the advertising sites require photos of her, like half a dozen photos of her in lingerie or naked. These usually do show her face. I don't like looking at these because I don't like looking at any pornographic material, and the women didn't, consent to me seeing these, obviously. I have looked at it a little bit to understand how it works, and again, I was surprised. Most of them show the woman's face, and if that material, all the pimps have to do is say, I'm going to send that material to your mother, your grandmother, your uncles, and she might not be able to go back home. I'm not generalizing that every Bulgarian, Romanian family would kick out their daughter. Some of them are the pimps, which makes it more complicated, and many of them, have taken them back when they come home and taken care of them, because a lot of these women come back ill and unwell and traumatized, right? So I'm not trying to generalize, but that's probably why most of them wouldn't want anyone to find out, serious repercussions.
Macht das jetzt aber nichts aus?
Nein. Noch weiß es nicht jeder, eigentlich fast gar keiner, nur mein engster Freundeskreis, aber ich denke, man sollte dazu so stehen, was man tut.
Eben, finde ich. Ja. Es ist ein Teil des Lebens und den sollte man akzeptieren.
I can understand that, from the perspective of a woman in it, this sort of nihilistic, well, might as well. And, I do have respect for any woman who shows her face publicly and says, I am or was in prostitution. I think that takes huge ovaries, really. But you can't just, call other women, cowards for not doing so, because as I mentioned, the repercussions are real.
Wann bist du zu der Erkenntnis gelangt?
Vor ein paar Wochen erst. Ist noch nicht lange her.
So, was war jetzt genau der Grund?
And she can never take it back. That's the shitty thing about the culture we live in, where you absolutely do have a scarlet letter on you. If I'm sorry, is it Jeanette? You've been on TV as the prostitute. What if someday, I don't know, you have kids or something, and you decide you'd rather not have your kids know because they could be bullied on the schoolyard, which is something that really does happen all the time. You cannot take it back. It's out there forever. So I'm actually thinking if I should blur her face, because I don't know if that woman in question, I think I'm going to blur her face just to be safe, because if she changed her mind, I don't want to participate in telling the world that she, was in the sex trade, because I don't know if she feels that way anymore, that she's it should be out there. I don't think she's anything to be ashamed about, but just in case she's no longer comfortable.
Dass ich irgendwie einfach keine Lust mehr habe, vor allem es zu verbergen, den Menschen etwas vorzuspielen und einfach mein Leben auf eine Lüge zu führen. Weil ich denke, gerade dieses Lügen macht mein Leben schwieriger als die Arbeit.
Yeah, I really wouldn't downplay that, having to live that double life, always in fear of someone finding out. Yeah, I respect her showing her face, but like I said, that might have made sense to her then, and just in case she changed her mind, I don't want to participate in putting it out there, because we don't know. Like, this was years ago, and especially now that that place, you know, is associated with human trafficking, maybe she doesn't want to be associated with it. So, you know, the hardest part about prostitution is the stigma. That might totally be true. I'm not saying like she's lying. It might totally be the case that prostitution itself is not a big deal for her. It's really just the stigma. The point is, her employer is obviously going to watch that segment. Does she have the option of saying, Johns are gross, I hate them, I go home and vomit, I want to, like, I clean my skin so much I start bleeding? She doesn't have the option to tell any other story than this one. So she might be totally truthful, but we don't know, because she's not free to speak freely. Ja.
Anita Steiger macht Frühstück, wie jeden Morgen, mit frischem Rührei. Sie und ihr Mann haben vor kurzem die Küche des Clubs übernommen.
Okay, so other than the cleaners and the women selling sex, there's the cooks.
Um 11 Uhr morgens muss alles parat stehen, dann kommen die ersten Mädchen zum Frühstück. Und dann öffnet auch der Club seine Pforten für die Herren.
So just FYI, the women are living in the rooms where they're selling sex, right? They're living in the brothel. Your whole life is the brothel. Your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner. You smoke in the backyard. I mean, who else lives at their place of work? Well, I guess construction workers sometimes do. But are you like sleeping inside your construction? Because like, again, women are sleeping in the beds where they're also seeing the Johns. Like, if there's a job that threatens to swallow you whole physically and mentally, prostitution really does like reach extremes.
Was sagen Ihre Kinder dazu?
Ja, die hoffen auf bessere Zeiten. Nee, dass es mal weniger wird, weil wir ja gesagt haben, die ersten 4 Wochen sind jetzt hart. Da müssen wir alle durch. Und jetzt schauen wir mal. Ich habe ja ausgeschrieben in der Zeitung.
Eine Aushilfe suchen sie, denn noch sind sie nur zu zweit und stehen beide oft 16 Stunden am Tag in der Küche, jeden Tag.
Okay, so there's people being exploited other than just the women. The cleaners are probably paid shit, the cooks are probably paid shit, but if you went up to the cleaners and cooks said, well, you could just go sell pussy instead, they'd probably be insulted. They'd probably feel harassed, right? And I'm not saying that like 16 hours as a cook is an exploitation. I just said that it is, but the things that happen in these private rooms that, I mean, I know because I have reports from what men do in the rooms amounts to rape a lot of the time, like, or using women who are high, etc. Actually, I do think it happens sometimes that women who are, for example, just at the reception then get asked by the Johnsons, so are you for sale? And that's the way that they could slip into the sex trade. But I think there's a way to be a dignified cook, and I think that's a valuable skill that society needs. There is no way to regulate prostitution that it meets all, you know, human rights, measures of, you know, sexual consent, labor protection laws, you know, just the contact with bodily fluids alone. But there is a way to be a dignified cook. And also, prostitution isn't required in society because we don't need men to, like, get, you know, young women delivered to give them orgasms on the push of a button. Like, it's not a necessary industry. So just FYI for any of you who are like, well, what about the cook? Isn't that the same thing? No, I don't think so. I think cooking is necessary and reformable. Prostitution is not necessary and not reformable. We can talk about that in more detail another time.
Auch sonntags.
Welche Eier?
Ja, weil sie wollte es mir machen, aber wegen dem Pferd.
I told you these women are naked. And just to say, I am blurring every nudity on every face of the women. Some of these might be trafficking victims. We don't know. But I want you to know that the real live show on television that was on a major German news network, Dreisat, which is like a regular channel, was showing these women right now, like, yeah, you can just see their breasts. Everyone can gawk at them. Just FYI.
Manche Damen sind doch recht anspruchsvoll, meint Anita, was das Essen angeht. Aber sie gibt sich alle Mühe.
Sehr lecker. Ist gut? Mhm.
The least that you want if you're gonna be in that brothel environment 24/7 is like have a decent meal. Duh, it's physically super taxing.
Wie ist denn das Verhältnis so untereinander?
Ich weiß nicht. Könnt ihr mich leiden? Ich denke schon.
the boss is going to see that show, do they have an option to say anything else? I think we're already seeing a surprising amount, you know, of kind of weird or disturbing info, considering that this is going to be live on TV and the PR guys signed off on it. But they're telling us, oh, it's just all the stigma. Like, nobody wants to work here because stigma, and that's why they have those long hours. It's not that these people are so desperate that they had to take the job at the brothel and agree to these hours, both the cooks and the cleaners and the women. I mean, I've talked about stigma here. It's real, of course it is. The part that's missing from the stigma discussion is who actually does the robbery, raping, murdering, and trafficking of women, which is John the Pimps. So that would be the highest form of stigma is violence. That's obviously not discussed. But I still want you to understand that as real stigma is, even in terms of, you know, having to hide it from your family, the people who really love, if the only thing critiqued about the sex trade is the stigma, is pimps. They love it. And that's their rhetoric. We can see that right here.
11 Uhr vormittags. Die ersten Kunden sind da. Dem äußeren Eindruck nach gut situierte Managertypen aller Altersklassen. 69 € kosten Wellness, Essen und das Plastikbändchen als Eintrittskarte.
And the women themselves don't make any money off the entrance money that goes fully to the brothel. It's just, you know, for the rooms, the food, etc. Oh my god, I've already been talking for 40 minutes, and I've only gotten through 5 minutes of the video. You know, that's how it works. I just have that much to say. So maybe we'll continue another time. There's like 25 minutes left of this video. If you're interested to see more, let me know, then I'll make that a priority. Otherwise, I might prioritize a different video. But yeah, I thought it's valuable to look into this. Just to remind you, they were done for trafficking operations in 3 different years, and they finally found out that from the start, the brothel owners knew and consciously participated. And the maddening thing is that TV formats like this still exist, right? They still invite pimps. They still go through brothels. They're like, this time it's a clean one. This time no trafficking. This time no dehumanization. The media is still so incredibly complicit because they know it's going to generate a lot of clicks, right? Showing breasts, the topic of sex. The media is so complicit. It's one of the most shameful things about being German. And that's saying a lot. Okay, more next time.